What does your product look like? Today, I have a marketing story that I absolutely adore and love, and I'm really excited to share it. I need you to hold my hand throughout this episode because it is going to come to a point, but we have to start really abstract. What is surrealist art? Think about how things are being seen and experienced by a user or a repeat customer. You're leaving money on the table when you don't consider these things. If you're not thinking how someone is shopping and viewing a product in that mobile experience, money on the table. I love working with Pilot House because while we are a performance marketing agency, we really pride ourselves on caring so much about brand and creative. At Pilot House, we don't just make ads, we craft them. Every edit, every word, every scroll-stopping detail is built with purpose and care, and I truly believe that care drives creativity and creativity drives results. Our attention to both scale and brand allows us to craft strategies that deliver you short-term results while making you long-term successful, which is so important for any DTC brand. If you are curious about learning more about working with Pilot House, you can fill out a lead form at pilothouse.co and let them know you want to go on a brand new ad venture. You don't actually have to say that. You don't have to make a pun. I'm not going to force you to make a pun. Just fill out the lead form. We'd love to chat with you. Hi, welcome back to Adventurous, the podcast produced by DTC and hosted by me, Aves. Today, I have a marketing story that I absolutely adore and love, and I'm really excited to share it. But I thought before I get into it, I would kick us off with a question that I think you should keep in mind throughout this episode. And that question is super simple. It's just, what does your product look like? When I'm working with founders and brand leaders, a lot of the times they move towards calculating their product by thinking of how it's made, what are the materials, what kind of comes together. In e-com, we all tend to think about products as the sum of all of the parts culminating into a puddle of features and benefits that we then use to sell the product because people can't actually touch the product in the world of e-com. But I think it's really important to take a step back and genuinely ask yourself, what does my product look like? From site merchandising to how you pack your orders and what that experience is like when you receive your product. The visual and textural experiences sort of encompassed in both of those things often get lost, I think, in the world of e-commerce. And if you can really nail those aspects, you are giving yourself a huge leg up. So today, with that question in mind, what does your own product look like? We're going to talk about one of, I think, the most brilliantly underrated logos out there, which is Chupa Chups, the lollipop. These lollipops have been around since 1958. They are merchandised and marketed perfectly, in my opinion, and the backstory behind the logo is actually really cool and interesting. And yes, I did look it up, and Chupa Chups is the correct way of saying it, I believe. I've been saying it like 9,000 times, so if that's not how you say it, I'm sorry, but that's how I'm gonna say it, according to the multiple sources. But to start digging into Chupa Chups and where the logo comes from, we have to start with a really big conversation and topic, which is, what is surrealist art? And I need you to hold my hand throughout this episode because it is going to come to a point, but we have to start really abstract, which is the most abstract, surrealism in art. So a really rudimentary definition of surrealism is something that moves beyond realism and reality. That's really obvious. Something that's like too strange to be real, and it's got this other world-like quality to it. And surrealism as an art movement actually began after the First World War. A group of artists who were soldiers came home traumatized and confused by how something like this could happen in the society that they'd known and felt they were thriving in. And so enter Breton, who is a French writer, and he was particularly moved by a little guy named Sigmund Freud's work and ideas around the unconscious mind. So what Breton believed was that when we ignore these unconscious thoughts, we are left unbalanced as a person. individually. And so he made this connection that refusal to contend with what is going on in your own subconscious leads to very unbalanced individuals, and unbalanced individuals lead to an unbalanced and precarious society. And that leads to things like war and famine. So his entire hypothesis was that through exploration of our subconscious minds, we could prevent further war and famine and all of these things that we still contend with today by just diving into what is going on in our minds. I think it's worth mentioning too, he got this idea when he woke up from a really wacky dream where some guy had been like chopped in half, and it was really scary, and that kind of triggered him thinking about what is going on in the part of my brain that I don't control, the part that doesn't feel super logical or aligned with, what I am thinking in the front of my brain and what I think I want. So that's kind of where his inspiration came from. And I think we've all had like weird, freaky dreams that maybe didn't start as on founding a new art movement, but did kind of shift the way that we thought about our unconscious minds. So yeah, Breton assembled a bunch of other really radical writers to join forces and start tackling this subject of our unconscious mind and thoughts through art. And so the surrealists started to take aim at our dream worlds in particular. They realized that our unconscious mind will often communicate through symbolism in our dreams, which is super interesting. They really worked as a unit, which I love, and they explored anything and everything they wanted to as artists. They based a lot of their working ways in something called automatism, which is a process that encourages you and allows you to just write and create whatever pops into your mind, like literally whatever. I find that automatism works really well as a concept when you are actually thinking about ads and angles for yourself. I love to use a similar process when working in like a nice controlled group where it's like, it doesn't matter how maybe unrealistic this idea or concept is. It doesn't matter how out there or outlandish it is. It's just about getting it on the paper, or in my case, iPad, because I love taking notes on an iPad. But it's just about getting it out there and kind of exercising it out of your system, which I think is really important. But as the movement of surrealism in art and the surrealists themselves, news of them sort of spread across the continent of Europe and also through other circles of artists. One way, just as an art history nerd, to really recognize if you're potentially looking at art made in this period of time or by these artists is that there's a lot of dislocation, juxtaposition, and sort of transformation usually as subject matter. So it feels like a dream, when you think of a dream and it just isn't quite real. That's exactly how a lot of these, especially visual pieces of art, came to exist. They just don't look quite real, and they give you that kind of odd feeling of maybe I've seen this before, it's slightly familiar, very dreamlike. Something to note is that while they were up and coming, while surrealism was spreading across Europe, there was a young artist that you might have heard of named Dali. Dali is one of the most famous surrealists, but he wasn't actually part of the original group. He was a child in Spain during World War I, so he didn't have that same experience of trauma. But he was a young art student, and he was also a huge fan of Freud. So it feels pretty obvious that he would have been really interested in the work that the surrealists were doing at the time. So when he got a little bit older, like most artists did back in the day, and kind of now, Dali went to Paris, where him and his friend made a famed surrealist film called Un chien andalou, which is definitely a surrealist film. It is kind of weird, shocking, surprising. It's not like a Marvel movie by any means. I definitely recommend checking it out. But it was that sort of brought him into the fold of the surrealists. And he started working with them and sort of revitalizing the surrealists in what I can only describe as their flop era. The group had gotten a little bit more serious, a little bit more political, but Dali, with that famous weird mustache, came in and he brought so much life and humor to the movement, which I think was critical in its success. He was like a really, really funny guy with a ton of passion and ideas, and he wanted to explore the deepest sort of corners of his own subconscious. And I think those things as a personality trait with the mustache on top make Dali a really good time and a really interesting guy. So while he was working with the surrealists, he made art in multiple disciplines, which basically means that he wasn't just a painter or a filmmaker like he created a bunch of different types of art, which is super impressive and kind of rare. But as World War II loomed, your boy, obviously getting a little bit nervous, went to America, which is where he really found the celebrity and prominence that kind of probably comes to mind for most of us today. He was celebrated and elevated from regular artist to celebrity when he made the move to America. He really took people on a journey of surrealism, and he's had a really lasting impact on art today as well as culture today. Like, we talk about subconscious minds all the time, and of course we have to give Freud his flowers, but Dali really made that accessible through the way that he communicated in his art, which I think is really cool. Surrealism, which is driven by philosophy and psychology, helped drive our culture, I think, to a different place of understanding when it comes to our subconscious minds. So again, there's really no limit on the impact that the surrealists had on how we think about art as a medium and ourselves today. And that was a long rant, and you're probably wondering, what does this have to do with candy or literally marketing? And that is a great question. Shockingly, the Chupa Chups logo that we all know and love today was designed by Dali, and not when he was like a young, struggling artist, which is a really important fact and really interesting to me. It wasn't when he was just, starting off and he was like slumming it, making a logo for a brand. I think that the tension that exists between surrealism and lollipop branding is so interesting and exciting. It's really cool to think about, and I'll get back to Chupa Chups in a second, but arguably Dali's most famous painting is The Persistence of Time, which I do want to talk about before I get into the logo of it all. Persistence of Time is a really, to me personally, eerie dreamscape, which shows time quite literally melting away on this barren landscape with the sea in the distance. There are melting clocks. There's a fly on one of them, which I think is a really fun detail. Time flies, ha ha ha. And I think that what is depicted on the ground is Dali's own face under one of these melting clocks. And I think that it's not scary at all. I think that it's a really cool way to note that we don't really understand time, and time governs our lives completely. So that is the kind of work, and we'll post a link to The Persistence of Time. Again, arguably one of his most famous works, but there's so many incredible Dali pieces out there. But that was what he was contending with. So why did he make a lollipop logo that worked so well? The sort of rumor around it all is that the founder of Chupa Chups was a friend of Dali, which is fun, and they were just sharing a cup of coffee, and the CEO was complaining about the old logo, which was basically the logo we know now without the daisy around it. And so Dali spent 1 hour apparently sketching and made a very small but incredibly substantial change to the logo. He enclosed it all in this daisy shape, which again is such a small tweak, but it is ingenious. This meant that the logo was going to be placed on the top of the lollipop, which so smart. And you wouldn't really think of it when you're thinking about what does that product look like. You might be thinking it has a stick, which prevents a child's hand from getting sticky when they're eating a sweet. It is wrapped in plastic. They come in bright colors. But what you don't think about necessarily, unless you're Dali, is the way that they were merchandising these lollipops, which was on one of those little trees. I'm sure if you've ever been to a gas station or anywhere that sells candy, you've probably seen the little tree where they're all sticking out, and you see the logo so clearly, and it looks like a bouquet of flowers because they're all facing outwards. And the presentation matters so much because there are so many sweets on the market. There are so many lollipops on the market, but that is such a distinct way to present them. And then backing it up with the logo is why this candy brand has been around since 1958. And I want to pause and talk about how this is relevant to us today, because I know I just talked about surrealism as an art movement and then Dali and the persistence of time. But what I want to talk about is how we think about merchandising our products when people can't touch or interact with them like they maybe could a lollipop at the gas station. I have audited a ton of brands in my lifetime. And one of the biggest misses, I feel like I say this a lot, but this is very true. It's genuinely one of the biggest, most common mistakes I see people make, which is really poor mobile site experiences. A large majority of your traffic is probably coming through mobile. And a lot of the times, PDPs are not designed to be super mobile friendly. When you think about it, if you are a desktop user looking at a website, your experience of that product is going to be much different on that website than if you're on your phone and you're using your hands, you're touching things, scrolling, it's all happening. And so not accounting for your mobile traffic is such a huge mistake. And I think this is lesson 1 in the Chupa Chups story and Dali, which is think about how things are being seen and experienced by a user or a repeat customer. This is one of the most overused phrases, but you're leaving money on the table when you don't consider these things, especially, like I said, a lot of the times the bulk of our traffic comes through mobile. And if you're not thinking how someone is shopping and viewing a product in that mobile experience, money on the table. If you think this is you, please reach out. We've got a fully stacked team of marketers who care so deeply about CRO and mobile traffic that we love to talk about it. And also, don't be nervous, I think is a great thing to say. I, last Q4, ended up working quite a bit with AppLovin, which is a platform for mobile gaming placements. And I was really nervous about it at first because it felt so specific, right, compared to the other types of marketing I'm doing. Like, I know exactly what someone's doing when they're served this ad. I know like what device approximately they're using. And it's such a different experience where, you know, someone could be, hopefully not, in their car on their phone scrolling reels. You never know. They could be in bed, in a meeting. Like, you don't know what their headspace is, but I fully knew what was going on with someone when I was creating ads for AppLovin. And at first, like I said, that made me really nervous, but then it was so freeing and fun as an advertiser to like share that connection almost, I guess, and to be able to meet people exactly where they were and comment on exactly what they were doing. So being able to tailor that experience directly to a user is so cool and interesting, having this controlled sandbox. And like I said, you don't really know if someone's visiting your website on their phone, what they're in the middle of doing or what they're thinking, but you do know how people use phones, which is very different than how people use a desktop computer. So I feel like I've been rambling about this a lot because I've seen some doing audits. Just make sure that your website is optimized for mobile and you're confident in how it shows up. You're confident in what the experience is like on a phone. And if you're not, like I said, call us up. We love it. But I'll move on to what I think is the next great lesson from Dali and Chupa Chups, which is more up in the air, I guess. But how his experience as a surrealist painter informed this really quick work he made of updating a logo that, for the record, hasn't really changed since he did that. There have been different iterations of the daisy, but I bought some Chupa Chups for the sake of this podcast for research, and I have to say, logo's the same, tastes great as well. But anyway, if you think about it, this guy spent his entire life exploring his own unconscious mind, and he was like a Freudian fanboy. And the impact that this had on his work on the logo can't go without noting, in my opinion. And disclaimer, I'm not a therapist. I love therapists. I really respect the grind. And I don't think any marketer should be really deeming themselves psychologists, but I think we can all be a little more conscious of the role that psychology plays in the work that we do and dive a bit deeper into the psychology behind what would actually drive someone to want what we're selling. When you think about it, advertising is a real mastery of cultural consciousness, which just means that you're able to know enough about what's going on in the world to make your product relevant to people, and also a manipulation of desire. And when I say those words, sometimes it freaks people out, but what I mean is just, why would somebody exchange their hard-earned money for your product? You have to desire something, you have to really want something to spend money that could be used on other things on that product. It's like, why did I spend money on this, on several of them? If you're listening to the podcast, I'm holding up a sunny angel. They're weird, they're odd, they're really unsettling to my partner, but I think they're really cute. And it's like, why do I go through the effort of getting one? Because it is very sweet looking. I love babies. They're really endearing to me. So it's like, what tapped in culturally and from Sunny Angels to make me buy that is so interesting. And like I mentioned at the top, get away from the features and benefits, because those are pieces that belong on the PDP, in retention plays, middle of funnel messaging. You know, why does someone want your product is something that shouldn't really revolve around, like, with the Sunny Angel, it could be a good paperweight, would be a good feature or benefit for it. But the actual why, the reason I purchased it, is not because it could be a good paperweight. It's because of a deeper unconscious desire to have cute things around in my life. So I'd really encourage you to like lock yourself in a room with yourself or trusted creative counterparts and practice a bit of automatism to answer this question for yourself about your own brand, taking out the features and benefits of it all. Think about when you see a Chupa Chup in the wild, the conscious part of your brain is going to think something like lollipop tastes yummy, lollipop good. This is something that is going to appeal to our conscious brains when we see marketing like it lasts a long time on a Chupa Chup. That was like one of their OG slogans. Great, appealing to the conscious part of our brain. But the way that the product looks, then when we're in that grocery store, the unconscious part of our brain is like, lollipop beautiful, like bouquet. Lollipop gives me hope and some comfort. Lollipop like a bouquet of flowers. Nobody gets me a bouquet of flowers. Let me give myself a lollipop. That's a whole unconscious string of thoughts. It's usually rooted in something that we don't necessarily want to confront. But that's the kind of stuff that we really have to think about as marketers. Like I said, we're not psychologists, but you can understand the psychology behind why someone would want your product and how you can start bringing those maybe unconscious thoughts into the foreground of your marketing. And then the last lesson that I think we can learn from Chupa Chups is brand relevancy over time. I haven't really discussed this yet. We talked a lot about the logo, but this product has been around since 1958. Think about how many lollipops there are, but this is a mainstay in most convenience stores. It was one of my favorites when I was a kid around Halloween. I love the like strawberries and cream flavor. That one's my favorite. Cola is also very good. But this product has been around for a long time and is still pretty beloved. So it means they're doing something right. And I wanted to take you guys through a couple of like cool iterations of their marketing to show you how they've stayed relevant over the years, because I think all of us can learn a big lesson there. So we'll start with the 80s, which is my least favorite decade in terms of hair, but my favorite decade in terms of music. And so while that logo was a spark of genius, they obviously couldn't rely on a logo and merchandising to keep this product going as long as it's been going. And so what they noticed was birth rates started to decline in the 80s. And so nervous to lose that juvenile market, the marketers started showing the lollipops as an alternative to smoking, which is really interesting and really fun and something they still do today. So they've got a slogan that's stop smoking, start sucking, which is really funny. And personally, it feels like a way cooler move than like vaping. I don't know, just rolling up to the function with a Chupa Chup feels really cool and like a conversation starter. In the 90s, a very famous Dutch soccer player and manager of FC Barcelona was sent a ton of Chupa Chups, and he had to give up smoking for health reasons. And so on the regular at games, he would be sucking on these lollipops to replace the habit of smoking as you coach a game. Brilliant. And then in the 90s, Probably the biggest collab anyone could have had was with the Spice Girls. And so in 1997, Chupa Chups released a limited edition run of lollipops that came with stickers. These were so popular that while I was researching this episode, I did find a Reddit thread where people were discussing them. Some people had like unopened ones. Wild. But they all came with stickers, which is a great hook for kids, especially Spice Girl stickers. All of the girls had different packages, which is really cool. They were all the same flavor, but a great way to stay relevant. And then in the 2010s, Chupa Chups became the lollipop of the Spring Hill Suites, which is a hotel chain by the Marriott. And I think this is such a 2010s thing to do. It's such a moment, very Instagrammable to be on your trip and have these nostalgic candies lying around. I also think it's very like hipster. It really makes sense for what millennials were up to at the time. They've been going crazy for those lollipops. So it really makes a lot of sense. And again, it just helps the brand stay relevant and stay at the forefront of people's minds, which wouldn't have even been a possibility without the logo. But because that logo and the merchandising was so strong, like I said, they have been around now since 1958, and who knows if they'll ever go away. But this actually brings us to a new segment I'm calling Ad of the Week, where I chat through an ad that really caught my eye this week. Naturally, looking at a lot of Chupa Chups ads and product shots, the ad of the week is a Chupa Chup ad that calls out the sugar-free line of these lollipops. So I'll post a link to this one if you are listening, but I will describe it as well. This ad shows a lollipop on the ground with a lineup of ants going around it to show that there's no sugar in it that the ants are like attracted to. Visually, I think this is so smart and cool, especially for a print ad. The drama of a fallen lollipop paired with the simplicity of just the ants going around it, it draws you in with the lollipop on the ground and then immediately gives you the angle, which I think is so cool. I love ads like this that present such a strong visual angle that you actually don't need copy. And this ad, for reference, has very little copy, just a logo in the side and a little bit of sugar-free copy as well in the side. It's just really clean and perfect, I think, for print as a medium for ads, and really exciting to see that like they continue to do cool stuff in their advertising. In conclusion, I'm not saying that you need to go out and find your own Dali to create an elevated logo and visual representation of your brand. That's obviously not possible because nobody's going to do it like Dali ever again. And also, it's just not a sustainable growth model for the average e-commerce business. But what I do really want you to take away from this week is to really consider how you are merchandising your product, both through ads themselves on the website, and then again, like I mentioned previously, how it comes in the mail and someone receives it for the first time is so important as well. Don't let those little details get away from you when you're focusing on scaling growth, because those exact details are the things that are going to unlock scale and growth. People having a positive experience with the product and brand is going to keep them coming back time and time again, like I've been doing with the strawberry and cream Chupa Chups for my entire life. So really pay attention to those little details. And also do not forget about the mobile thing that I said. Really think about what your mobile experience is. I know it's crazy to talk about World War I, the surrealist art movement, Dali, and mobile website experiences in the same podcast, but it is, again, one of the most common mistakes I see. And if you don't quite know how to optimize your website for mobile, give us a call. We'll reach out and then we'll give you a call because we would love to help over at Pilot House. And last little piece of info and piece of advice I really hope you take away from this is to just really think about how we can leverage the psychology behind the desire for our products that we sell into our ads. Everyone these days can say this product does X, Y, and Z. It's super easy. You see so many ads with creators based around that. But when you can start really understanding who you're selling to, so who are your personas, and then what is the subconscious desire driving them to make these purchases, again, those are the things that are going to fuel your ability to scale over the next 3 to 5 years. Those are the things that if you figure them out now, in the long term, you're only going to get stronger and stronger as a marketer for your brand. And again, if you need any help diving into any of these really big topics, just give us a shout. The PH team really lives and breathes for this stuff. I know because I'm one of them. That's it. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Like I said, a lot of art history, but very relevant and very exciting. We'll link any visuals that I talked about in this episode as well. And yeah, tune in next week. I'm going to be chatting a little bit more tactical and practical tips around how to build a successful Father's Day sale or campaign. So that'll be really exciting. And yeah, thanks for listening. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts, whether it is Spotify or Apple Music, and leave a comment. I love hearing what you're thinking. Leave a comment if there's a type of ad you want us to review as well. Just love chatting ads, chat and shop. We'll talk to you guys next week, and thanks for listening.